we're back, and thanks so much for joining us today with Mr. Nate Boyer, who really a lot of people do not understand in some ways how the majority of today's conversation needs to be steeped in Mr. Boyer's reality, because Mr. Boyer is, I'm going to say, not responsible for, but a contributor to a debate that's been going on and raging in this country, and you don't even know that he was a part of the debate. And it really wasn't about the debate. It was just about how to see if he can make some people come to an understanding, which is really, I think, what we all need to do today. So, Nate, again, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you very much, Montel. I appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely, brother. And your explanation so far as to, how you really felt, I got to tell you, I was also one of those people who literally the first time I saw people sitting during the national anthem, I was like, are you kidding me? Really, when somebody smacked the crap, and I understand, listen to me, I was in 100% support of our Olympic athletes holding a fist in the air at the Olympics. I was 100% behind that. Felt that that was the right thing to do at the time. But I got caught up in the wrong idea of what the argument was even about. I know that I was upset about the fact that Colin was seated first, and that's what I heard about. I didn't even see the first time that he took a knee. But then when I heard about the conversation, I guess you must have had with him, is that right?
Yeah.
And he decided to take that knee. I'm going to tell you, my heart changed 180 degrees out. 180 out immediately. I said, wait, stop. If I really believed, I do solemnly swear and affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I shouldn't have been upset in the beginning. But go ahead and explain to us now, so, you saw this, and of course it was disappointing to you, but at the same time, you understood his and had empathy for his feelings.
Yeah, I started to think about and read and listen, I guess, more than just let myself feel a certain way. I mean, you can't control the way that you feel, but you can control how you react to it, for sure. And so I was glad. I'm happy that I didn't just act on impulse, and I didn't just respond with like, yeah, but you don't know this because of my experience, because it wasn't, first of all, it's not going to help anything. And second of all, it doesn't really matter in the moment. It's not about me. It's not even about Colin, really. It's about what he was doing. And so I took a step back and I listened more to about what he was saying, and I listened to the way that he was articulating it. And nothing he was doing was violent, and nothing he was doing really sounded that angry. I mean, he wasn't happy. You could tell by the way he was talking, but it wasn't necessarily like, these are my demands, this better happen or else, anything like that. It was just, this is why I'm doing it. And I don't think this is right. I think that, and this isn't about the military. And I think that, that flag is supposed to represent everybody equally. And I don't think it does. I don't think it feels that way. And I was like, okay, that's fair. And that thought, which I ended up putting it all in an open letter. These thoughts of like an open letter to Colin, these thoughts of, well, this is why I feel the way I feel. These are my experiences. This is the type of stuff that I've seen and experienced overseas, which I think is very different. But for me to pretend to know what you've experienced, or people that you're standing up for or sitting down for, or whatever you want to call it, is unfair. I will always be a white man. I've always been a white man. And the only white man I know how to be, or the only white man I have experience of their background is myself and like what I've experienced. So long story short, I don't know you. I just know me, and it's unfair to me to make judgments about you or assumptions about you and why you're doing what you're doing. So, Colin, I want you to understand that this was all in that letter, that I joined the military to fight for those that can't fight for themselves and to defend those First Amendment rights in the Constitution. And you are exercising those. So I support that, and I look forward to the day that you're one day inspired to stand again when the anthem's played, and signed it. You know, that was it. And I wrote it for the Army Times. You know about the Military Times.
Oh,
Not that
yeah.
many people read it. Like, let's be honest.
Right.
Not that many people read it.
Right.
And the reason I did it there, because I knew they weren't going to take my stuff out of context. They told me I could write whatever I want. And they didn't, because, you know, other publications were like, can you write an op-ed? Which to me felt like they wanted me to take a stand, take a side, make an opinion. And I just, whatever. So I wrote it that way. I send it to them that night, and I wake up in the morning, and 10 times more than any, you know, like even when I had that opportunity with the Seahawks and there was some media stuff surrounding that, 10 times more buzz around this, shared everywhere. My email inbox is blown up. My voicemail's full, all this stuff. And I was kind of surprised. I thought, honestly, I panicked a little bit, and I thought maybe I wrote something like something got taken out of context, or maybe I should have double checked. I had a glass of wine when I was writing the thing, so maybe I screwed up, you know. And I went back and saw what people were responding to, and it was really just, it was, I think, I don't want to put a number on it, but we'll say 80% or whatever, even 90% of the country is pretty damn reasonable, and we're like, you know, I think they appreciated just somebody that was like, look, I feel this way, but it's not right or wrong that you feel that way, and you're not hurting anybody, and what you're trying to do and accomplish is about making our country better. You know, I mean, I think, and as we see it now, especially these last couple of weeks, everybody wants to see better policing and criminal justice reform, like, for the most part. I mean, there's going to be some people that don't, but like most people are like, yeah, this needs to be better. We need to fix it. And that's what he was trying to do. So Colin even read it, and he reached out. He called me and said he wanted to meet. And I was like, wow, this is like, that's crazy. But I mean, this is important. Of course I would love to. So I go down to San Diego. They're playing the Chargers when the Chargers were still in San Diego in the final preseason game of 2016. You know, it's Military Appreciation Night. It's just like maybe a week before 9/11, which would be the 15th anniversary. There's going to be a flyover with Navy SEALs jumping in the stadium, and there's an African-American sailor who's going to sing the anthem on the field pregame. It's a very military town, all these things. So there's definitely like, oh, he better not sit, you know, he better not do this, better not do that. And he'd already committed and said, like, I'm not going to stand until things start to change. And so I go down there. I meet with him in the lobby of the team hotel like a few hours before kickoff, which is unheard of. Usually at that time, you know, you're in team meetings, you're getting ready to get on the bus, go to the stadium with the team, warm up, play the game. But, you know, the coach, Chip Kelly was a coach at the time, and who's a good friend. Jed York is one of the most progressive owners in the league. All these people are like, yeah, this is important. Like, absolutely sit down and have that conversation. And that night, Colin was going to start in the game too. And so we sit down. Eric Reed joins us in the lobby. We have this conversation. We just talk about our backgrounds, experiences. We sat there for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. We laughed at a lot of stuff. We made fun of each other. I mean, it was just like two dudes in a locker room having a conversation. You know, that's like, once we get away from the social media and we get away from, you know, we just, like you and me are talking right now, it's just so different. And it was great. And I was like, I got a sense of who he was. And that was important for me. I didn't want to feel like is this a media stunt? Is he wanting to meet with me? And like, so he can say, see, look, I sat down with a veteran. I don't hate the military. And it wasn't like that at all. And the end of the conversation, he actually asked me, Nate, do you think there's a different way I could demonstrate, a different way I could protest that's not going to offend people in the military? I said, absolutely not. There's nothing you can do that's not going to offend some people. And honestly, more importantly, if you're not inspired to stand, if you don't feel the pride that I feel, or even like a sense of that at all, I don't want you to do anything out of obligation. I think that is worse, to be honest, you know, to feel like you have to stand because of this and that. If you don't feel that kind of inspiration, I said, I respect that. But to answer your question, no matter what you do, people are going to be upset. But if you're asking me what I think would be maybe seen by some as more respectful, I said right now, and this is just me talking, you sitting on the bench isolated from the rest of the team can be construed as like, oh, he just doesn't care. or he's kind of sitting this one out, or maybe even that he's like making it about him because he's away from the team. And I said, after talking to you, I know that's not what you're about. I don't get that sense. So I think the most important thing is to be alongside your teammates, because you're going to go on the field and play with those guys. You know, you're going to be in the locker room with them. And I know from being in the military and playing football, like we stand shoulder to shoulder with those people. We don't always agree. I mean, I'm sure you had plenty of people you didn't like and didn't agree with in the military, but we put it aside for the most part when we go out there and do our job, because we still love them. We still take a bullet for them. We still fight for them. And if they're trying to do something good, maybe they got a different way of going about it that we don't like. But if they're still trying to make things better, then, you know, we got to respect that. So I said, I think the only option you got that makes sense to me would be taking a knee if you're not going to stand, because he said, I'm committed to not standing. And I said, to me, kneeling has never been seen as disrespectful. People take a knee to pray and, you know, propose to their wives, and the players on the hurt on the game, they take a knee out of respect. And when I go to Arlington and visit my buddies, you know, that I carried in that casket, I take a knee at his grave every time. And I spend a few minutes and I just, it's like taking a time out for a second, you know, and it's a sign of reverence in some ways. And it's almost like a flag is flown at half mast. I mean, there's so many different ways you can slice this up and kind of, you know, digest it and look at it. But I thought it was more respectful, and he agreed.
Just that sentiment right there alone. Actually, I've been talking about that now on podcasts and on interviews for weeks now, about the fact that never before in the last maybe 2 millennia has taking a knee ever been disrespectful. You know, when the king and queen walked by 1,000 years ago, people dropped to a knee. When people go to church every Sunday around the world, multiple religions, from Catholic to Episcopalian to Baptist to you name it, they drop to a knee in reverence to pray to God. And I know myself, whenever I go to the Vietnam Memorial, I've done so 3 times in my life, and each time I've been there, I have been on my knee. Every time I've been there, because, you know, I find the name of somebody who I know was a brother of somebody else or someone else that I served with, and I touch that name, I drop to a knee. Every time I've been to any military VA cemetery, I drop to a knee. So I think that's probably one of the most respectful things. I mean, come on, if you can drop to a knee for God, you can drop to a knee for our flag.
There's some pretty iconic photos and videos I've seen too of Martin Luther King, and people. And at this point, you know, back then I wasn't alive, but neither are you, right? I mean, because you're only 40 years old. You know, but like he often you know took a knee with a group of other people, you know, and whether it was a silent prayer or whether it was a sign of protest, it was always a sign of respect. You know what I mean? And I think that's my point was, back then, you know, not everybody respected MLK across the board like pretty much they do now. Like pretty much now, as time has passed. Same with like Muhammad Ali and a lot of people in history. Probably Roberto Clemente and Jackie Robinson, you know, countless more. Even like Billie Jean King and Babe Didrikson, all these, you know, female athletes. It's really interesting, you know, to kind of see that and think about that. But I think over the last 4 years, there's still a great amount of people that they see it as disrespectful. That's that, period. But I've seen a lot of people, more so in these last 3 weeks, but over the last 4 years, that once they listen and hear of why, and they learn about this conversation, and that Colin was sort of, you know, he was willing to give a little and make an adjustment so that he didn't offend a whole nother group of people, you know, in the military. Like that was his intent behind kneeling. When they hear that, they're like, I still wish he would stand, but I respect that. I respect that. And the point of the whole thing anyway is to get people to listen to the message, to the narrative behind it. And that's important. And I've had so many people reach out recently and even before that, like, what about this? What if they protested this way? Or what if they, you know, any time besides the anthem? Or what if they did it, you know, they all came out of the locker room and took a knee, and then they took 2 minutes to like have a conversation about social justice, and then the anthem. I'm like, man, like no matter what, like the point of the whole thing is to make people uncomfortable and get them talking and hopefully change things, which is happening. So like you can hate the mechanism all day long, but if he didn't do it in that way, I don't think we have this conversation at this level. I really don't.
Yeah, but now the back up again, go back to 2016. Were you surprised at the reaction when he took that knee that day? I mean, you were driving down the road, went, "Oh no, I told him to do that, Lord!" Right? No, I mean, were you surprised by the reaction of the public to this?
Um, I think not surprised by the reaction, surprised by the traction, and like how much it became. It snowballed quickly and became almost a divisive topic. Well, yes, a divisive topic, divisive conversation. The irony in that to me was, we had this conversation. Colin asked me, not like, "Hey man, kneel with me," but he said, "Would you kneel personally?" And I said, "I won't." I said, I personally don't want to, because I feel differently about those symbols, right? I feel differently about those symbols, but that's because of my experience. And, but I understand you don't have that experience. You don't have that relationship to those things. And you feel very differently about what they have represented in your life and when other people's life, people of color. I said, and I respect that. I said, I don't want to, but I will stand next to you because I respect what you're doing. And I respect your willingness to listen and make a pretty big adjustment just over the course of 2 hours, because I feel like we respect each other, and it's, I don't know. I'm on board with that. So I'll stand and I stood next to him, on the field that night during when the anthem played. And man, if you see that picture, I have my hand in my pocket for about half the anthem, which is no in the military, right? But it's because of what do we do when we're nervous? We put our hands in our pockets or do something like that. I didn't even realize how nervous I was. So I went back and watched the video of it and saw photos. And I'm like, man, can I even imagine how he felt, how nervous he was, you know what I mean? Knowing that he's going to get this backlash. And I remember hearing the boos out of the stands. There was plenty of people singing the anthem and plenty of great stuff happening. But what stuck out to me was the negative, sadly. There's several people booing from behind us the minute he took a knee, because it just wasn't exactly what they wanted him to do. And then just like, that's the only time I think I've heard that song and I didn't feel the welling of emotion and pride. I felt a welling of like nerves and uneasiness. But then I also go back and look at that photo and I think this is really cool too, because it's two people that don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything, have totally different experiences, skin colors, beliefs, whatever. But they still respect one another. They're willing to be next to each other and not only have a conversation, but come to some sort of a solution where they both feel like they were heard and move forward. And I was like, that's a really cool lesson, as you said earlier, like for the country, even though I didn't realize the impact it would have in any way. I'm just like, when I look back on it, I'm like, man, I'm almost glad I was pretty naive to a lot of the things going on, because I don't know if I would have done that. I might have chickened out and been like, well, I'm going to get ripped by the military community and by the whatever. I'm going to get ostracized. And maybe I wouldn't have done it. So in some ways, I'm kind of glad I was ignorant to a lot of this stuff at the get go.
Do you have kids?
I don't have children, not that I know of.
All right, do you plan on something along the way?
I say it again.
You plan on getting married and having something along the way, or?
I do. I'm gonna be an old dad.
But as an old dad, don't you think you're going to be proud sitting down one day thinking to yourself that it's your conversation that sparked a landslide reaction in America that may lead to a better America?
I already am proud that I was just part of that conversation. I'm proud of my willingness to at least take a leap of faith and just go for it and go, and go sit down with the guy and even write that letter. Like, I am very proud of that. I'm very proud of that. Even if it takes way too long for things to change, which in a lot of ways it has, I mean, yes, we've abolished slavery. Yes, we had the civil rights movement, but there's still, and it's not, there's not like necessarily legal segregation, but there still is segregation. There still is inequality. There still is way too much racism and intolerance for other people, and a lack of listening, a lack of just consideration and empathy for somebody else's experience that I hope it will be at least a small piece of moving that forward, getting that fixed, ironing that out. I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but if it's getting better, if it's made it better in any way, that's great. And I am proud of that. I'm, whenever I do have kids down the road, I will share that with them, and they'll probably get annoyed by it. Be like, oh, dad's bragging about his being a social justice warrior again or whatever. But no, I am proud of that. And it's something I never would have thought I'd have been involved or had a conversation about, honestly, even that week. It's just something that didn't cross my mind. It was like, well, maybe I'll do a lot to help the veteran community, with my life. And I still do that. And I love the veteran community. I think we're the most diverse microcosm in America. And we're going to be a big part, along with athletes, of bringing this nation back together and fixing things. That point aside, I never thought this would be a part of my life. But I'm glad that it is. I'm really glad that it is.
I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I would wish that I would have seen this conversation. I'm going to tell you the truth. I wish I would have seen our conversation on 60 Minutes. I wish I would have seen our conversation on 2020. I wish I would have seen our conversation on CNN and Fox News all simultaneously running this conversation so people could just take a minute, pause to understand. As you look at what's happened in the last now 21 days, and the night's going to mark day number 22 of demonstrations around America, I will tell you that 99% of the people that are demonstrating do not know anything about the conversation that you and I have just had.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and it's what sells. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, it's hate, it's division, it's ugliness. I don't know why. Where that comes from. If it's a human failure or something that has been injected into us, I don't know. And that hurts me and that frustrates me, because you're absolutely right. The more I've been, a lot of my close friends, they say, why do you engage with people on social media? Why do you even try? Like, just let them be haters and blah, blah, blah. And that's the reason, what you just said. Even if it's just one person, like, it drives me nuts. It consumes way too much of my life, but I do it. And I try to do it no matter what side, because I've had plenty of people, we'll just call it on the left side of this argument, that have said, you why don't, because you don't kneel, or because you don't, because Colin did something else because of your conversation, like, you made him an Uncle Tom, or you've co-opted the narrative, or you're like, how can you say that, that most cops are good people, or whatever? How can you say these things? Like, that's wrong, that's right, whatever. And obviously we know all about the other side of that, and that's the most painful part, is getting hate from the Special Forces community, from the Green Beret brothers, guys I served with or guys that I didn't serve with, but they don't know. So many of them don't understand or don't care to read or listen to these conversations. It's just they see an image, or they see a headline, or a headline something gets taken out of a context from a conversation, and boom, that's the headline. And it doesn't ever get told properly. And it's crazy. I don't know why. I don't know why that hasn't happened. I think it's very important. But
well, to me, it seems.
I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you so much. But it seems like to me, it's like what we've discussed is the focal point of what the discussion should be right now when it comes to policing. Yes, in fact, there are bad apples. There's no question. I will not sit here and say that every police officer is a bad police officer. I'm not going to do it, because it's not true. Now, the fact that some of the good police officers won't call out the bad police officers, I will hold you accountable for that. If you really want to be a good police officer, you should tell your teammate to chill, you know what, out, or no, that's wrong, and be willing to turn in a person who's done something wrong. I feel that way 100%, but I also feel that we got to be able to have the conversation, just like the conversation that you and Colin had in that lobby. It's time for both sides to stop building walls in that lobby, but sit down at a table in that lobby and have a conversation about, okay, guess what? This is how we got here, but we're not going to get any further unless we talk.
Yeah.
How do we get people to understand that even more? Do you have a ongoing podcast or something that you put out on a daily basis or no?
I don't. uh, I've thought about doing something like that, but then I don't know. I haven't, and maybe I should consider doing something like that. But I just think it takes a willingness. It takes a willingness for people to swallow some pride, and sit down. I think it's very powerful when I see two people that have completely different opinions and ideals on something, to not only have the conversation through Twitter or whatever, but like this, where it's like it's face to face. You can hear them, you can see them, and they can relate their experience and why they feel like they feel. It's very healthy, but we don't see that enough. But I try to push that in every interview that I do. Anybody I talk to, opportunities like this, because I always say this. I always say, I don't speak for the military community. I don't speak for the veteran community. Sorry, it's starting to rain in the truck. I don't know if it's getting loud here. But I don't speak for anybody but myself. And I stand for anybody's rights and freedoms. If they're doing it in a respectful way, if they're about making this country better or this world better, if they're about positive change in some way, then I respect that and I support that. And I always will. But at the same time, like, I'm also willing to have a conversation with anybody that feels completely differently than me, and has, and we're America is an incredible place. It is all over the map. We got people from everywhere believing every different thing. And it's like, I love that about this place. We're also the most charitable country. And, from a military experience, like, we got so many young men and women every year that are willing to take that oath to defend it and to go overseas and fight for people they can't fight for themselves. You know what I mean? And take politics out of that stuff. Most of the people that volunteer, it's about doing something honorable, and they do want to represent the country in a positive way. And I just think for people to have this mindset of, because it's not the way I see it, it's not what I think's honorable, or it's not what I see as correct or patriotic or whatever, that it's just evil or wrong or unpatriotic. It's so sick, it's so sick. And I don't even think most people that say it actually believe it. It's just like, it's just, there's just so much. A lot of that, I think, is people, it's a hate for their self, and they project it. It's something they don't love about themselves. They don't feel like they do anything that matters or whatever. And they project it, and they just want to tear down somebody that's trying to do something. They're just trying, and they may never achieve it, but they're trying. And that breaks my heart. That breaks my heart more than anything, to fight for this country, and then to see how divided it is, to see how people won't even, they don't care to listen. They don't respect one another. That's painful, but all we can do is keep trying, I think.
Keep trying. What's next for Nate Boyer? What's next? What do you have planned? What are you up to right now? What are you thinking about?
Yeah. So, I have circled back on storytelling has always been an important part of my life. When I was a kid, when I was deployed, all these times, like, stories, inspirational stories of people overcoming, stories like this, like what we just talked about, have inspired me and got me through some tough stuff. So I came back to Los Angeles. I'm pursuing that film dream. I actually produced my first feature film in January that we're in post-production. But more importantly, is some of the charity stuff I'm fortunately involved with. I co-founded something called MVP, which stands for Emerging Vets and Players. We bring together combat vets and former professional athletes, and we help them find purpose and identity once the uniform comes off. And to see that group now, to see these, the battlefield and the ball field are very different spaces. I would never compare what we do on the field, but the locker room, camaraderie, and the loss of self, and who you are, and the belonging is very similar, and you're in your 20s and 30s typically. Lucky if you're in your 40s, and it's gone. It's like you don't have the team anymore, and you feel like I'll never be great again. To hear NFL Hall of Famers like Tony Gonzalez and some of our Marines from 2-7 who got back-to-back deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, lost 29 guys, and that one battalion's lost 45 to suicide since then. To hear these people who have what you would think very little in common to go through the same stuff, and to like talk about it and relate on such a human level is really inspiring, because I think that's, once again, a place our country needs to continue to pursue. It's just that empathy and understanding and listening, and then working together to solve these problems. Like, we can all be a part of the solution. So got that going on. And then the other thing real quick is a clean water project in East Africa with Chris Long. So Chris Long, NFL, played in the NFL for, I think, a dozen years, couple of Super Bowls. His dad was Howie Long. Everybody remembers Howie. So Chris has started a clean water project in East Africa where former NFL players and now combat veterans, every year we go out to Tanzania and we climb Mount Kilimanjaro and raise money for these clean water wells. And it's been pretty incredible so far. We've had over 1 million people served, and just the opportunity to go over there and see how grateful these people are for just the simple things, the basic clean water, food, basic shelter, and education. A lot of times schools are built by these water wells. It's incredible to see. So like I'm always inspired by that, because I know there's so much in the world we can all do, and there's so much to be grateful for here amidst all the tough stuff we're seeing every day. Just remembering like how lucky we are that we have these freedoms, we have the opportunity to change on such a great level, and then we can still fight for those people as well and help them achieve just the basics, the simple things in life that we all take for granted for.
Well, hey, Boyer, I got to tell you, sir, thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for what you're going to do. We need people like you to make sure, like I've said, and I say it all the time, it took all of us, no matter how disparate we were and how disjointed we have been, it took all of us to get here. We are not going to make it any further if we don't all come together to figure out how to take the next step forward. And you're leading in those conversations of how we take the next steps forward. So thank you, sir. I want to thank you all for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Make sure you tune in again. Last name but not least, I can't go without saying thank you for your service. And it's not just the service that you had as a Green Beret, but thank you for your service and continue to service as a citizen of this country and a citizen of the world. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Montel. I appreciate your service as well, bro. Past and present and future.
Yes, sir. You be well. Join us on the next Let's Be Blunt with Montel.